Every language you've never heard of is a language that lost. Dalmatian, gone. Cornish, effectively gone. Prussian, gone. Polabian, gone. The graveyard of dead European languages is enormous, and the pattern is always the same. A larger power arrives, making its language the language of government and education and opportunity, and with a few generations, there's nothing left. These 5 languages looked at that pattern, survived Roman conquest, Byzantine expansion, Arab armies, Russian imperial policy, and 1,000 years of demographic pressure, and simply refused. Basque has been in the same mountains since before Latin existed, and no one knows where it came from. Lithuanian was almost erased by a Tsar's decree and came back through book smugglers. Maltese is Arabic that survived the Crusades and the Inquisition on a Catholic island. 5 languages, 5 survival stories, 5 completely different reasons they're still here. Welcome to the Airlearn Language Show. I'm ranking these on this criteria. How improbable the survival. How many forces were aligned against the language, how close it came to disappearing, and how specifically unlikely it is that you can hear it spoken today. The higher the odds against, the higher the ranking. If any of these sends you down a rabbit hole, Airlearn teaches several of the languages that tried to replace them, including Arabic and Russian. Links in the description. Number 5, Icelandic. Icelandic is the easiest survival story on this list to understand, the hardest to believe. Iceland was settled by Norse Vikings beginning around 874 CE. Over the following millennium, Scandinavian languages on the mainland evolved substantially. Old Norse became Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, related languages, but changed beyond to the point where a modern speaker could read the original sagas without study. Icelandic didn't change. Or rather, it changed so slowly that a modern Icelander can pick up a saga written in the 12th century and read it with roughly the same effort an English speaker needs for Shakespeare. The reason is partially geographic. Iceland sits alone in the North Atlantic, with no land borders and limited contact with the continental languages that were evolving rapidly under mutual influence. Isolation is a preservative. The deeper reason is the deliberate cultural conservatism, a tradition of linguistic purism that Iceland maintained with unusual consistency. When new concepts arrived that other languages would borrow words for, Icelandic coined its own. The word for computer in Icelandic is tölva, a compound of tala, meaning number, and vulva, meaning prophetess. A number prophetess. Today, Iceland has approximately 370,000 speakers. By the standard logic of language survival, more speakers means more safety. Icelandic should be endangered. Instead, it has one of the most stable and structurally conservative language communities in Europe, actively maintained by a population that has treated linguistic preservation as the cultural project for centuries. What nearly killed it? Nothing came close. Icelandic is the least imperiled language on this list, which is why it ranks number 5th. It didn't survive despite a near-death experience. It survived by never having one. Number 4, Maltese. Malta is a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean. It has been ruled in sequence by Phoenicians, Romans, Arabs, Normans, the Knights of St. John, France, and Britain. It is today a Catholic country and a member of the European Union, and its national language is Maltese, the only Semitic language written in the Latin alphabet and the only Semitic language that is an official language of the European Union. Maltese is Arabic. Structurally, at its core, Maltese is a form of Arabic, specifically descended by the Siculo-Arabic dialect spoken in Sicily and Malta during the Arab rule of the island between 870 and 1091 CE. When the Normans arrived and ended Arab rule, the population gradually converted to Christianity, and over the following centuries borrowed heavily from Sicilian, Italian, and eventually English. But the grammatical skeleton, the core vocabulary, the basic sound system, all of it is Arabic underneath. This creates a linguistic situation that has no real parallel in Europe. And also, if you know Arabic grammar and core vocabulary, you will find them in Maltese in a way you will find in no other European language. What should have killed it? Everything. The Normans replaced Arab political power and the populated converted. The language of religion became Latin. The language of culture became Italian. Under British colonial rule from 1800 to 1964, English became dominant in administration and education. At every stage, Maltese had a more prestigious language above it and no institutional support of its own. It survived because it remained the language of daily life and domestic speech across every political transition. The rulers changed. The people kept speaking Maltese to each other, and when Maltese nationalism developed in the 19th and early 20th century, the language became central to the argument for a distinct Maltese identity. Arabic grammar, Norman and Italian English loanwords and all. Number 3, Georgian. Georgia sits at one of the most dangerous intersections in the history of the world. To its north, Russia. To its east, Azerbaijan. And beyond it, to Iran. To its south, Turkey and Armenia. To its west, the Black Sea, which sounds like an escape, but is also an invasion route. Georgia has been in the path of the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Arab Khilafah, the Mongol Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Persian Empire, the Russian Empire, and the Soviet Union. Georgian is still here, spoken by roughly 4 million people, with a literary tradition dating to the 5th century CE, written in one of only 14 original scripts ever independently invented in human history. A script used for no other language, developed specifically for Georgian, and still in use today, unchanged from its essential form. The script is part of the answer. The Georgian alphabet, Mekejuli, in its modern form, is not borrowed from Greek or Arabic or Cyrillic. It was created for Georgian, encodes Georgian sounds that no neighboring script captures, and has functioned for 15 centuries as a visible marker of Georgian distinctness from every surrounding civilization. When the Arab Khilafah controlled parts of the Caucasus and Arabic script spread through the region, Georgians kept writing in Georgian. The Georgian Orthodox Church was the other pillar. Christianity reached Georgia in the 4th century, and the Georgian church maintained its own liturgy tradition in the Georgian language throughout every subsequent political transition. While political rulers changed, and they changed often and violently, the church continued in Georgian, producing literature, preserving the language, and tying Georgian identity to Georgian script in a way that made suppressing the one feel like an attack on the other, what nearly killed it. Soviet nationalities policy came closest. The Soviet Union promoted Russian as a language of modernity and inter-ethnic communication, and in some periods actively suppressed minority language education and publication. A 1978 proposal to remove Georgian's status as an official language of the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic triggered mass protests in Tbilisi, tens of thousands of people in the streets. The Soviet government backed down. Georgian kept its status. That is what survival looks like when a civilization decides its language was non-negotiable. Number 2, Lithuanian. In 1864, the Governor-General of the Russian-controlled territory that is now Lithuania issued a decree banning the printing of Lithuanian text in the Latin alphabet. The ban lasted 40 years. The logic was straightforward as a tool of cultural suppression. If you cannot print a language, you cannot publish books, newspapers, or educational materials in it. Without those, children cannot learn to read in it. Within a generation or two, it retreats into domestic speech and folk memory, and from there, the path to extinction is well established. The Russian authorities were not wrong about the mechanism. They were wrong about the outcome. What happened instead was the knigoneshne, the book smugglers. Ordinary people, farmers, priests, teachers, traders, began crossing the border into Lithuania Minor, the part of Lithuanian-speaking territory under Prussian rather than Russian rule, where the Lithuanian printing was still legal. They collected books, newspapers, prayer books, and educational materials printed in Lithuanian. They carried them back across the border, concealed in their clothing, in false-bottom carts, in loads of hay and grain. Over the 40 years of the ban, an estimated 30,000 to 40,000 individual smuggling runs brought Lithuanian language materials into Russian-controlled territory. People were imprisoned for it. Some were exiled to Siberia. They kept going. The ban was lifted in 1904 under pressure from a broader liberalization of Russian imperial policy. By that point, the smuggling network had maintained Lithuanian literacy through 4 decades of official suppression and produced, as a side effect, a generation that associated their language with resistance, with sacrifice, with identity worth risking prison for. Lithuanian is also separately one of the most linguistically remarkable languages in Europe, which adds another layer to why its survival matters beyond the political story. Lithuanian is the most archaic living Indo-European language. It has preserved features of Proto-Indo-European that every other branch of the family lost thousands of years ago. Lithuanian sunus, son, is recognizably close to Sanskrit sunu. Linguists study Proto-Indo-European use Lithuanian as the window into a language that stopped being spoken before writing existed. The printing ban came with a generation of erasing one of the most valuable linguistic archives in the Indo-European family. It failed because farmers put books into their boots. Number 1, Basque. Basque is the oldest mystery in European linguistics. It is spoken today by approximately 750,000 people in a region straddling the border between northern Spain and southwestern France, the Basque country, or Escuela in Basque. The language has 7 dialects, a standardized written form called Batua, developed in the 1960s, and a living oral and literary tradition. It is, as far as anyone can determine, completely alone. Every other language in Europe belongs to a family. Romance languages descended from Latin. Germanic languages share a common ancestor. Slavic languages, Celtic languages, Baltic languages, all of them connect through enough historical reconstruction to Proto-Indo-European. Even the language families considered isolated in Europe have some recoverable connections. Basque has none. It is a language isolate, a language with no demonstrated geological relationship to any other language, alive or dead. What this means historically is that Basque, or a direct ancestor of it, was almost certainly spoken in Western Europe before the Indo-European migrations that brought the ancestors of Latin, Celtic, and Germanic to the continent. Basque is a pre-Indo-European language that survived the arrival of Indo-European languages, the Roman conquest, the Visigoth kingdoms, the Frankish Empire, Arab expansion into Iberia, the consolidation of Spanish and French states, the Franco dictatorship, which explicitly banned Basque in public life and education for decades, and the homogenizing pressures of modern national state. The Basque country's mountainous terrains provided geographic insulation. The Pyrenees and the Cantabrian Mountains made the region difficult to fully absorb into surrounding political structures. The Basque identity and the Basque language became deeply bound to each other, so that speaking Basque was not just a linguistic choice, but an act of cultural self-definition. Under Franco, the suppression was direct and severe. Basque was banned from public use, education, and publication. The name itself, Escura, was officially discouraged. The response, when Spain transitioned to democracy after Franco's death in 1975, was a cultural and linguistic revival of remarkable intensity. Standardized Basque was developed and promoted. Ikastala Basque medium schools expanded rapidly. The language's speaker base, which had contracted severely during the dictatorship, began to recover. A language that was here before the Romans, that survived everything the Romans and everyone after them brought, that nobody can place in a family because it was already here when the families arrived. That is what number 1 looks like. These 5 languages survived for 5 completely different reasons. There is no single formula, no one factor that explains all 5. But if you look across them, something emerges. Every one of these languages survived because the community speaking it decided, not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment, but consistently across generations, that the language was worth the cost of keeping. A language is not a natural object. It doesn't survive the way a mountain survives, by being too large and too hard to move. It survives the way a fire survives, because someone keeps feeding it. These 5 communities kept feeding it. That's the whole story. If any of these sent you towards a language, Airlearn is a great place to start. Links in the description. See you in the next one.